9:12 is our time, and it's always great when we get the opportunity to bring him back and talk about issues surrounding firearms and legislation and some things that may have confused a few folks over the years or in recent days, depending on what it is we're talking about. Dan Wos, he is the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy and Good Gun, Bad Guy 2, and he joins me this morning here on KRMS in the Morning Magazine. Dan, great to have you back. How are you this morning?
Hey, doing great, KB. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
My pleasure,
Always
sir.
A blast.
My pleasure. Before we get to some of the things that we wanted to talk about here this morning, anything that's on your mind that you'd like to talk about almost immediately to address the listeners, anything that folks should be paying attention to in this day and age? I mean, so often we get what the mainstream media wants us to hear about, and the things that they try to use to deter us from paying attention to what we should be paying attention to as far as what's going on in Washington, D.C., and other parts of the country relating to firearms, the Second Amendment, you name it. So anything that you really think folks need to be watching, something that's on the horizon?
Well, I think, we talk about Judge Kavanaugh being appointed, and I think that's something to keep your eye on because although, the anti-gunners don't want any cases going to the Supreme Court because he will probably, balance out, the anti-gun and the pro-gun, message. So I think that's one thing to really keep our eyes on.
Well, again, the topics surrounding Kavanaugh kind of come and go, and we really haven't heard a resounding yes or no, I don't think, from the Senate, those folks that will have the opportunity to confirm him or maybe deny confirmation, depending on how things go. But I think overall, he's got a pretty good track record. He's really, I think, more or less, as far as the Second Amendment goes anyway, Dan, a friend to the Second Amendment. And, maybe with him in there, the Second Amendment will remain safe for a time anyway, until the possibility to bring in another judge, or if who knows if President Trump will ever get the opportunity again to nominate a Supreme Court justice that could again be a friend of the Second Amendment. So as you said, we'll definitely have to keep an eye on this. 9:15 is our time. I wanted to go over something. You sent me this video a couple of weeks ago, and it's actually something that people can find on YouTube. And you could, I'll tell you what, it's Dan Wos commentary on CNN anti-gun interview. That's how it's titled on YouTube. If you want to go look for this, it is an interview with one of the commentators for CNN, and also a gentleman by the name of Brian Claypool. He is an attorney, and I guess Brian just happened to be there in Las Vegas when that Las Vegas shooting took place. And, of course, then we have Jan Morgan, who we've had on as a guest on this program several times. She is considered the First Lady of the Second Amendment. And the topic was about 3D printed guns and blueprints available on the Internet for 3D printed guns, and how everybody was going nuts, and people were just basically taking this thing and running with it in a manner of the sky is falling, and not necessarily looking at this for what it's worth. And I think you and I talked about this. The last conversation we had in July was about the gentleman and the company that was putting the blueprints on the Internet. They were able to do so for a while, and then they got them taken off. And I think now that they got them put back on, you've got various attorney generals from different states suing or threatening to sue if these are not taken down, because the whole the whole thought process around these things is that they're going to fall into the wrong hands, that terrorists will get copies of these 3D printed guns, criminals will have opportunities to get these blueprints of these 3D printed guns, when in reality we know that you may have access to the 3D printed guns in the form of blueprints, but do you really have a 3D printer that you can use to do anything about it?
Well, that's a good point. How many people do you know who actually have a 3D printer? And the guns that are potentially able to be printed really aren't that practical. And some experts will say that they're really only good for one shot before they malfunction. So that in itself is part of the argument. But the other part is, if we want to start banning information, this is so ridiculous, because why do we not ban websites that teach you how to build a bomb or teach you how to poison people or all sorts of bad things that are out there on the internet? The reason they want to ban this particular information is because it helps the anti-gun liberal Democrat agenda. Really is what this is all about. This is all politics. They know as well as anybody else that 3D printed guns are not going to become an issue. They want to make you think that everyone is going to be printing these guns in their basement, and we're going to have the Wild West out there, and that's the imagery that they try to, project, and it's so far from the truth. It's really a political argument. They're trying to make it about the gun.
Well, we know, as you mentioned, there are so many things that you can go online and for one reason or another print off and do harmful things with. I mean, and it's not just what you can print off, it's various videos that you can watch, and certainly there's tons of things on the internet now that could be considered harmful. Just like when we say, you could kill somebody with a rock, you can kill somebody with a board. A gun is not the only thing out there that you can use to kill somebody. And now they're talking about the acid attacks over in the UK, where people are actually going up and throwing acid in the faces of people. And I believe in one instance there was even a small boy that someone threw acid at and really messed this kid's face up, but more importantly, I think affected his vision greatly as well. So when we talk about 3D printed guns and blueprints for 3D printed guns, there are so many things that have been on the internet for so long, so much longer than something like this, and all it does is add the fuel to the fire as far as the anti-gun talk, anti-gun legislation, sitting down and talking about the common sense gun laws and things like that. So I guess, Dan, this is one of those where you look at it and you say, is it really about the 3D printed gun, or is it really about someone's First Amendment rights? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at this.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's exactly it. It is a First Amendment issue. It's not even a Second Amendment issue, but they're trying to make it look like a Second Amendment issue. But yeah, you just brought up a thought. There's instructional videos out there of how you can kill people with your bare hands. I mean, why are they not focused on that? Because not that I'm against that. I think everybody should know self-defense. I think it's a good thing, but they don't. That doesn't bother the anti-gun left, because they're really not focused on any of that stuff. If we can get past the smokescreen that this is about guns, if we can get past that, take that layer away for a minute, and just imagine that this isn't about anything but politics. This is about control. This is about government control. It's about politics, and it's about left-wing ideology. That's why they have their fake racism causes. That's why they're always pushing that. They're pushing their fake sexism. They're pushing their fake, all their isms that they push, and all their, supposed bigotries and all the things that they push are really almost non-existent in this country. You wouldn't know that by watching the mainstream media, though, because they perpetuate this stuff. Mm-hmm. And the reason they do that is because all these little causes that they have make up the Democrat, liberal, progressive ideology. Without these components, without their anti-gun component, without their racism component, without their sexism, and all the other stuff, their base of causes starts to deteriorate, and they have nothing to fight for. So when these things are not seen in society in reality like they want it to be seen, so they can pretend to be the social justice warriors of all these causes, when it's not seen in reality the way they project it to be, they have to perpetuate more of it, because they need to be seen as the saviors. They need to be seen as the people who are trying to make everyone safe. So they'll perpetuate their causes, and this, the anti-gun, the gun violence, quote, gun violence cause is just one of them.
Well, I know that you look at this from the standpoint of a lot of times racism is used as a tool to try to shut people down.
Exactly.
If you don't go along with my cause, well, then you have to be a racist. Well, you don't even know me. How in the world can you call me a racist based on this chance meeting we have? We're talking about a particular topic. I don't view it from the same point of view as you do, and so that automatically makes me a racist. I don't know if you're familiar with Kevin Jackson. Kevin Jackson is a contributor to Fox News. We've interviewed him on this program plenty of times, and he says when somebody calls you a racist, he says you call them a racist right back.
Well, I've talked to Kevin a little bit. I know him. I don't know him personally, but I know that he is a really honorable guy. But Kevin, KB, let me ask you this: how many racists do you know?
How many racists do I know? Well, I guess it depends on the subject matter.
Typically, people can't come up with a short list of racist people that they know.
I don't know.
Because they just don't exist. This country is not a racist country. I go to the same places that everybody else goes. I go to the post office, the grocery store, the bank. I interact with people of other races all the time, every day. We're always pleasant to each other. We hold the door for each other. We say thank you and hello and have a nice day. This facade that there's this rampant racism in our country is fake. And if people would start to understand that and start to see that it's all really just a perpetuated notion, I think what would happen is the Democrats would lose a lot of voters, and they'd lose a lot of leverage in politics.
I'm going to disagree with you ever so slightly on something, Dan. And
okay.
I think racism does exist, but not on the level that a lot of people say that it exists. And right. I say that in the sense that, and it works both ways. I mean, there are a lot of issues with blacks and Asians and blacks and Hispanics and blacks and whites as far as racism is concerned. So we have to use paint this thing with a broader brush in terms of it's not white people that are racist. Every culture has racists in it, and those people, as you said, want to perpetuate that. And I think the constant throwing around of the race card in order to get your way or get people to back down, that to me is just ridiculous, because I'll say this and I'll stand behind it, that you want to find a way to get through somebody, or you don't like what they're talking about, call them a racist and see how that works. See if it shuts them down or shuts them up. I think in this day and age, in most cases, people are starting to say that, you know what, I'm not a racist. I'm not going to sit here and be called a racist. And just because I don't believe in the same philosophy that you do doesn't necessarily make me a racist, or doesn't make me a racist. But I guess in some instances it does exist. However, I think overall it's not the kind of problem that some people want you to believe that it is.
Well, that's exactly my point. I mean, obviously there is racism, but it's in no way the levels that they want you to think it is. And so yeah, I think you kind of made my point. And if I wasn't clear, I'm sorry about that.
No, you're clear. You're fine.
You're right. Exactly what you said. I totally agree.
It is 9:27, Dan. We need to step aside and take our first break. And when we come back, we're going to play some portions of this video. Again, it says, if you want to find it on YouTube, it's Dan Wos, commentary on CNN anti-gun interview. It involves a lawyer, Brian Claypool, and the First Lady of the Second Amendment, Jan Morgan. And some interesting things about this, some observations that I know Dan has made in watching this in order to try to get a certain point across. But some things that I just kind of picked up on my own, and I'll see if maybe Dan thinks the same way. Dan thinks the same way that I do about some of the things that I noticed. Our break coming up. We're back with more on the Morning Magazine, and your phone calls are welcome. 302-7000, 877-330-1150. Email us live at krmsradio.com.
This Wednesday, jump on the bus for free. This Wednesday is the world-famous shootout meet and greet on the Bagnell Dam Strip. Boats, and more big, fast boats all up and down the strip. And this Wednesday only, you can ride the Strip Express bus for free. So this Wednesday, jump on the bus to see all the boats. From the Iguana Campground to Monarch Plaza, just wave at the driver and he'll pick you up. See you on the Strip. And jump on the bus.
You deserve a vacation. Come on, you earned it. Plan now for a beautiful trip to Huatuco, Mexico with the radio station and friends from the lake. Beat the winter blues January the 19th through the 26th for 8 days at the all-inclusive 5-star Dreams Resort. Everything's included. Top shelf liquor, gourmet food, hotel, non-stop airfare, transfers, even your tips. Everyone that went on this trip last year said, let's go back. Huatuco, Mexico is located just 200 miles north of Guatemala on the Pacific side and is considered the safest state in Mexico. It's different than other tourist zones in Mexico as it's not crowded and located next to a national park with 7-mile-long beaches, which you can visit by wave runner and find your solitude. The price for this 8-day all-inclusive trip will amaze you. Call Direct Travel to Osage Beach for all the facts. Call 348-3166. Come on and join us. Beat the winter blues January the 19th in Huatuco, Mexico with your friends from the lake, KRMS 93.5 Rocks and Classic Country 104.9.
Stop scrubbing your bottom for heaven's sakes. Just stop and see us. Econolift at the lake.
Econolift uses only the highest quality materials, completely galvanized metal parts, and totally enclosed polyethylene tanks for more stability in high traffic water. Made with 100% virgin plastic, not recycled plastic that could weaken your tanks. And they're backed by a lifetime warranty. That's why Econolift is the most dependable yet affordable boat hoist available today.
Econolift at the lake.
You've seen that guy. Top-of-the-line pontoon boat. All the options, big horsepower, but his pontoons are already dark, stained, and look 20 years old. Don't be that guy. With a single application of Sharkite Metal Protected, you can keep those pontoons looking new for years and years. Protects against fresh, brackish, and salt water. Sharkite's UV-resistant and doesn't crack, peel, chip, or flake. It's easy to apply and won't ever yellow or discolor. Come on, don't be that guy. Get Sharkite Metal Protected now. Sharkite.com.
The difference between an average home and a beautiful home may be something as simple as your countertops. When you choose Ozark Granite, you choose to have a beautiful home. Granite countertops in your kitchen or a granite vanity in your bathroom will last for decades and increase the value of your home. Come check out their remnants at great prices and stock slabs in the showroom. Ozark Granite is now located just off F Road in Sunrise Beach on Crawford Drive. Call 573-552-5774. Ozark Granite.
The talk leader.
We love it. It's number one.
News, weather, sports, entertainment. News Talk, KRMS.
(9:31), 67 degrees. Got a mostly cloudy sky, but still no rain showing up on our in-studio Doppler weather radar. The potential is there for some shower and thunderstorm activity, possibly today, tonight, tomorrow. Sitting here watching this news story on Fox News, Dan Wos, another bloody weekend in Chicago. We're worried about 3D guns and the blueprints for 3D guns falling into the hands of the wrong people. Looks like the folks in Chicago really... I think we should be a little bit more worried about what's going on in that part of the country as far as all of the guns that are out there. And I would imagine a large part of those guns in an illegal capacity that, these people, these thugs and and criminals in Chicago are getting the guns and just shooting up that city. I mean, is a set of 3D blueprints more important than the loss of life that we're seeing in the city of Chicago?
Well, that's just it. The media wants to make these 3D printed plastic guns such a concern and such a headline. And, the anti-gunners would never take their picket signs into the south side of Chicago or the west side of Chicago and demand that the gang members turn over their guns. They'd never do that. It's just it's just not safe enough for them. But and they'll ignore the death rate in Chicago, the homicide rate, and the violence. And anytime you take a city like Chicago or any place, and you essentially deem it a gun-free zone, you make it so difficult for good people to protect themselves with firearms, then the bad guys, they swarm in, and they will take advantage of that because they know there's no opposition. There's nothing stopping them. And when you have the cops told to stand down to this stuff, I just don't understand how long these politicians in these cities will continue this, because it just puts good people in danger, and they don't seem to ever want to change. The city's run down. The areas of that city are run down. It's rampant violence. And I'm going there for a speaking event next month, and we're going to talk about all this stuff. And it's just terrible. It's terrible, and we need people to have the ability to defend themselves. Otherwise, that's why we're going to 8 people killed over this past weekend in Chicago. It's the second most violent weekend of the year so far. We've got time to go, though.
Let's talk a little bit about this interview that we've been kind of previewing here a little bit, setting up our listeners. You had recently watched an interview between this attorney Brian Claypool, who I guess he was a survivor at the Las Vegas shooting, that massacre there that took place in Las Vegas, and then of course Jan Morgan, who is the First Lady of the Second Amendment. You had gone through this entire video and kind of looked at it for what it was, and made some commentary based on what you saw and how Claypool was reacting at one particular point in this. And if anybody is following along with this video, I put it up to about 9 minutes and 52 seconds. The total video itself is a little over 20 minutes, 20 minutes and 14 seconds. But I'm going to just kind of jump in here with Claypool's rant, and then we'll kind of start and stop it a little bit, and then you can kind of tell folks what you think based on this particular video talking about 3D guns, and how the president says he spoke to the NRA about 3D printed guns and his thoughts on it, and I guess he's not real keen on it either. But this is the attorney, Brian Claypool, and we're going to let you hear some of what he had to say right now on KRMS.
Serial number thing is not quite true either. It's not illegal to make homemade guns for personal use and not register them with a serial number.
That's Dan
what
right
he could
there.
have said is it's illegal to make undetectable guns. So it's almost like this was said to intentionally mislead or throw people off. But I know Brian wouldn't do that. He probably just didn't know. I mean, he's not an attorney or anything. Then he goes on an angry tirade, looks directly into the camera, and that was interesting, how he looked directly into the camera and yells at President Trump.
That's the first thing. The second thing is, instead of President Trump calling the NRA, guess what? Give me a call and give victims across this country a phone call.
Now, if I didn't know any better, I would say he has an agenda here, but he's a victim, and I want to respect that.
That's the first thing. The second thing is, instead of President Trump calling the NRA, guess what? Give me a call and give victims across this country a phone call who have dodged bullets from assault weapons, and find out how they feel about it before you propagate this recipe for mass disaster.
Then he starts getting very visual again, talking about how the bullets are designed to destroy your body. And he used very animated visuals.
Do you know that on their website, they have what's called a VZ58, Allison? Do you know what that is? It's a 17-inch long gun, 7 pounds. It's going to carry out mass killing.
That's what they're giving the blueprint to?
That's one of the blueprints. And do you know, on top of that, that these bullets that are in these weapons are made to destroy your body. When they enter your body, they destroy you. So this is not acceptable in a civilized society. Yeah. And it's not funny.
Now what?
All right, we'll put a hold on it right there. Well, the thing about this, the one thing that I noticed, and this is right from the start, he's in the studio, and Jan is at an affiliate location somewhere else. So, in my opinion, she's already at a disadvantage because two things, he can talk over her, and at any time the host can shut her down.
And they both do that. Well, I shouldn't say that so much about Brian. Brian let her talk. It was the host who kept filibustering her and shutting her down, and I believe that's because, anytime they do that is because they don't want other people to hear what you have to say, because it goes against their narrative that they're trying to create. And I call it guarding the narrative, and I even talked about that a little bit in this video. But if you notice, now Brian used a lot of mass killing and a lot of rhetoric that's typically used by anti-gun activists. It seems to be part of their vocabulary. And together, him and Allison, the host, seem to be working to just really just build up and drum up a whole lot of fear in this interview, while trying to shut Jan down as she's coming in with truth. And now, and I say this in the video multiple times, and I want to make this clear. I don't want to make Brian the bad guy. I mean, they said he was a survivor of the Las Vegas killing, and my intent is not to make him the bad guy here. It's to point out rhetoric and terminology and things like that. I will note that Brian is also an anti-gun activist. He's also an attorney, I soon found out, and he's representing other survivors of the Las Vegas killing.
And I wonder, and I wonder if that is something that should be looked into, because he has a personal interest in this, and so could his representation in be considered, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a legal word where, collusion, maybe, I don't know. But
conflict of interest?
Conflict of interest, that's it. Thank you so much.
I'm glad you said that, KB. That was one of the things that came up in my mind. Now, again, I don't want to accuse this guy of anything, and I want to respect the fact if he was a survivor of this incident. But I don't know. I don't know if that's a conflict of interest to be, a victim of a situation while representing others in that from that same situation. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not an attorney, and I'm not sure of the legal,
but
precedents.
I would almost have to say yes, it is, because you want somebody who's unbiased, somebody who doesn't have a dog in the fight, and this guy obviously does if he was there, and he's talking about representing other people that were there. Certainly, I would think that would be the first red flag that any judge would see and say, well, you can't be involved in this because of the fact that you were, quote unquote, involved in it. So, all right, Dan, let's find some other points in this video as well. Any other places where I could forward, or can we just pick it up from here, that we can kind of see where the host is maybe trying to shut Jan down just a little bit?
Well, I'm trying to find a spot. Okay.
About where?
Okay, here's an interesting spot. It's right around 1330. Around 1330. Jan starts talking.
Allison, if you really want, if Brian and the Democrats really want to address the issue of mass shootings,
Democratic issue.
They need to talk.
Remember, anti-gunners always want gun control to appear to be a safety issue. In other words, them working to keep people safe. They always want to be perceived as the saviors, and they hate when we point out the fact that it's really a political issue and part of the overall Democrat agenda. All right, this is where it gets very interesting. If you notice, Jan starts bringing up the topic of psychotropic drugs, and Allison puts up a giant filibuster roadblock. Watch.
About the one thing that no one wants to talk about, which is the number of mass shootings that involve psychotropic drugs. Stephen Paddock, the very guy.
Yeah, I know that that's where you guys always go, but I want to stay focused on the homemade guns.
Because
I know that you want to talk about the drugs.
It's not just us guys. It's not just the NRA. It's not
Jan,
just
hold on. Let me pose my question to you because it is connected to mental health.
Big Pharma does not want to discuss
Jan.
Big Pharma doesn't want to discuss it.
Jan, how does it help to have somebody mentally ill be able to print their own gun, make their own gun off a 3D printer at home?
Now, there are a couple reasons why people filibuster.
Well, let me jump in there because she's talking about mentally ill people making their own gun with a 3D printer. And again, we have to go back to the original topic that we talked about when we began this conversation. How many people actually own a 3D printer? And I don't think there's many.
No, well, that's true. And, like what I talked about in this video is as soon as Jan started talking about one of the actual causes of human violence, Allison interrupted her, filibustered her, whatever you want to call it, and shut her down because Allison did not want that to be the topic of discussion. Allison wants the gun to be the topic of discussion, and she completely flips it on Jan, and she doesn't let her talk. You can hear Jan getting angry in there. She's trying to get the truth out, but she's up against a brick wall because Allison's, filibustering her. It's terrible. But when you watch this video, you start to really see what happens in these interviews.
Dan, we're going to step aside. We need to take another quick break. Dan Wos is our guest, author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, Good Gun, Bad Guy 2. We'll come back, and again, your phone calls are welcome on KRMS.
I sat down the other day to write a new commercial for Bentley's, and over the past 40-plus years, I've told you about the servers with years of dedication, the mouth-watering menu of prime rib, steaks, chops, fresh seafood, king crab legs, daily specials, and more, all set in an English pub atmosphere. But to tell you the truth, until you've actually walked into Bentley's and experienced it for yourself, well, you don't know what you're missing. Bentley's. Do yourself a favor and try it tonight. Bentley's open Monday through Saturday starting at 5, right on Business Highway 54 in Lake Ozark.
Do you have clutter around your house? Extra trash you need to get rid of? Or debris from your construction job? At FJ Disposal, you can dispose of all your non-hazardous waste. FJ Disposal is your local dump on the west side of the Lake of the Ozarks, located just outside Laurie on Highway 135. Open Monday through Friday, 7 to 3:30, rain or shine. You dump inside their building, keeping you out of the elements. Check out the website at fjdisposal.com, or for pricing or questions, call 573-374-5522.
Lake Malou has a new name and a new location. Visit Club Malou on Osage Beach Parkway next to the post office. They're open 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday. Club Malou offers exclusive discount memberships that save you money at a variety of area businesses, including Pepperoni Bills, Eagle Lanes, and many more. Alone or with a friend, stop by the new Club Malou and enjoy bubble tea, cold brew coffee, and on-the-go breakfast treats. You won't be disappointed. Club Milou. Visit ExperienceLakeOfTheOzarks.com.
If your nonprofit group, club, or civic organization has an event it would like to have announced on KRMS and 93.5 Rocks, send it at least 3 weeks in advance to PSA@KRMSradio.com. The community calendar is sponsored by Slumberland Furniture, Tire Biters Peanut Pub, Central Missouri Building Inspections, JJ's at the Copper Pot, Mills & Sons Insurance, RJ's Family Restaurant, Prime Lending, Jeff Hedberg, Bobby Bash Team, Remax Lake of the Ozarks, and presented by KRMS and 93.5 Rocks the Lake.
Peter Hernandez talks about Rick Bryant at a recent charity event.
We're owners of La Roca Dance Studio, and we've had this event. This was our 10-year event, so it was a big year. I've worked with him at several different things. We bought our building through him. He just really cares a lot about the community, and he's always willing to help out. Him and Angie both. I would recommend Rick 150%. No matter what you're trying to do, he can make it fun, and that's what it's about. There's something about him that can just bring it up a notch.
346-4777 or go to BryantAuction.com.
Has the earth gotten warmer? That'd be great to know that. That'd be a very convenient truth.
News Talk KRMS, now heard in high definition on 93.5 HD3.
9:47, my guest is Dan Wos, and it's good to have Dan back with us. We Try to touch base with him at least once a month, like around the third Monday of each month. Talking a little bit about this video that took place on CNN between attorney Brian Claypool and Second Lady of the First Amendment, Jan Morgan. Dan, we think we should play a little bit more of this for the listeners and kind of give them a good idea of what was going on here.
Sure.
I'll just kind of pick it up where we left off as we went into the break.
Number one, they don't want to hear what you have to say because it contradicts their internal beliefs and it feels uncomfortable to them. Or number two, they don't want other people to hear what you have to say. That's what I call guarding the narrative. I say it all the time. As soon as we start talking about the real causes of human violence, the anti-gun radicals do everything they can to bring the conversation back around to focus on the gun. In this case, Allison seems to slip and even reveal the fact when she says, I know that's where you guys always want to go, but I want to stay focused on the homemade guns.
Yeah, I know that that's where you guys always go, but I want to stay focused on the homemade gun.
She knows the strategy of redirecting, and she's accusing Jan of doing it while she is actually doing it. You have to pay close attention here. Jan tries desperately to talk about the actual causes of violence, but Allison blocks her every step of the way and completely dismisses everything Jan says and goes right back to the agenda at hand when she asks the question, how does it help to have someone mentally ill print their own guns?
Stephen Paddock obtained his firearm legally. This wasn't
I'm just curious. This is just my question.
Gun.
Just answer this question.
No,
how does it help to be able to have a mentally ill person create their own gun at home?
This is where any logical thinking viewer can see this interview is all a big propaganda piece with one agenda and no real interest to solve any problems.
Stephen Paddock obtained his firearm legally. This wasn't
I'm just curious. This is just my question. Gun. Just answer this question. How does it help to be able to have a mentally ill person create their own gun at home?
Allison then uses the making it easier comment again. And Jan says something funny. She says, Allison, I'm sorry you can't get this.
Mentally ill people can create their own guns regardless of the law. Criminals and thugs
but how is
and
it
terrorists
better to make
don't
it easier?
abide by the law. So no laws, Allison, I'm sorry that you can't get this, but no law is going to stop a criminal or a
I guess
terrorist
that we
or a
just don't
crazy
believe
person.
that.
Now, Jan and Allison both know that Allison gets it perfectly, and she's really just creating a narrative. Jan again tries to give more facts here, and Allison continues to filibuster, but this time Allison doesn't seem to even have anything of substance, so it just sounds like she's babbling for the purpose of talking over Jan, and she actually gets a bit sarcastic when she says, and maybe they can print them now in their own den. Again, trying to reference a secretive or sinister intention.
Laws are completely ineffective.
Killing mass numbers of people.
I think that people just don't believe that
laws have not been effective.
Never stop anything.
Look at Chicago.
We do think that laws
Chicago
stop
has
crime.
more gun control laws. We already have over 20,000 gun control laws in America, Allison, and they don't address the problem. But how about this?
So you think that laws don't matter?
Paris,
Gotcha.
France. Paris, France.
Fair enough.
Dan, I'm sorry, I have to stop. I can't take it anymore. I can't take this woman talking over Jan. It's ridiculous. It's to the point where Jan is sitting there literally trying to make her point, and the woman won't let it happen. So I can't do that. I can't.
I gotcha. I totally gotcha. And if people want to go watch it, and I think they'll really see something from a new perspective. But let me point out one thing, KB,
sure, that
we didn't go over here. Allison in this interview used the term, why do you want to make it easier for bad people to get caught? So she kept using this term, making it easier, and it implies that gun owners want to make it easy for criminals to get their hands on guns. That's the whole part of the narrative. The whole underlying thing of this whole interview was trying to help the viewer believe that gun owners want to make it easy for criminals to go out there and kill people.
That's absurd.
Well, it is. But the thing is, this is the stuff that people watching these interviews don't see, because it goes through your thought process pretty quick. It goes through your subconscious, and you don't really catch all this stuff. This is part of my regular research. This is how I wrote my books, by analyzing this stuff and looking at it. So this was just normal. This was just normal research for me doing this. But people seem to like it, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback on it.
I enjoyed it. I watched the whole thing a couple of different times, and I will say that in watching Mr. Claypool, he at certain parts of this interview seems like he's being coached, or he was probably talked to, I'm sure, ahead of the interview. And then there are certain times when it almost seems as though he's coached, where he more or less doesn't sound like a victim. He doesn't sound like somebody who was there. That I guess in most cases, if you talk about a fatal shooting, people don't automatically start talking about common sense gun laws or gun legislation or what needs to be done. They start talking about the experience that they went through, what it was like to have to hide from this particular person that was up above and shooting down on the crowd and things like that. Or, did he see anybody get hit or get hurt? There's no mention of any of that in this portion of the interview. Now, maybe he talked about it prior or he talked about it after the fact, but he certainly doesn't seem at all like a victim in here. He seems more like an advocate and somebody who we've seen, obviously, in other instances that have come in and said, well, this is exactly why we need more common sense gun law legislation, and this is why we need to look at the laws and come up with more laws and so on and so forth. And I felt bad for Jan again, because she was someplace else and she couldn't actually be in the studio, because being the broadcast journalism professional that she is, she knows how to handle this, and she just wasn't being allowed to speak.
Well, that's true, and everything you said, I'm glad you said it. And as far as Jan, yes, she really does know how to handle herself well, and she's impressive to watch in these things. And her and I talk about this stuff a lot. We discuss these strategies that the antis will use. So we're in conversation, Jan and I, among other people, about this stuff, and it's really interesting when you get down into the details of how they manipulate the conversation and how they create the narrative that they want you to see.
And I think I think you've almost and I'm sure maybe there are places out there that do this now, but I think you've kind of created a new class for us to take, analyzing the interview, sitting down and looking at it in depth and looking at it not just once, but playing it back over and over and over again to pick up those little subtle nuances that are in this video that if you're not paying attention, then you can fall into to the same trap, if you will, that maybe so many other people that have watched this video have fallen into.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have said that since this video, and this is the first one I've done, and it was actually very quick. I did this one very quickly. I didn't... after going back through and watching it again, there's a bunch of other stuff that I could have pointed out as well.
Right.
People seem to like this. The feedback I've gotten on it has been great, and they want me to do more of these, and I thought that was kind of cool. Like I said before, this is just my regular research.
Well, it's interesting, and I think for the most part it makes us all stop and want to pay attention a little closer to what's going on and what we're being fed, because obviously there, anytime Jan tried to make a point, she was shouted down, blocked, whatever you want to say. You mentioned that this reporter, Allison, was filibustering or just basically saying anything. And if you listen to what Jan was trying to say as opposed to what Allison was saying, Allison's not even really making any kind of point. She's more or less just babbling to try and shut her down.
Exactly, and it's all so Allison can guard the narrative.
That's
what she's doing. She's standing guard of the narrative. She needs to protect that narrative, and that's the reality of it.
Dan Wos, we are up against the clock, sir, but always a pleasure and a great opportunity. And we hope that when folks see interviews like this, that they'll really not always take them at face value, but take the time to, maybe go back, watch it again, and look for things. And, of course, especially anytime you run into a situation like this, it's more or less, and it's on CNN, so that should tell you even more right there. So have yourself a wonderful day, sir, and we'll look at getting together in the month of September.
Thanks so much, KB. Looking forward to it.
All right. That is Dan Wos, the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy and Good Gun, Bad Guy 2.